If you are someone who looks at social media, even glancingly, you've surely seen the rise of social media therapists. These are, in most cases, real therapists who talk openly about mental health issues and offer what is hopefully good advice for managing our emotions and our relationships. Lauren LaRusso is one of these therapists. She has amassed a huge following by talking specifically about infidelity to those who've been betrayed, to people who've had secret relationships outside of their monogamous relationships, and to the secret partners in an affair. Sometimes Lauren talks directly to camera, and other times she brings more theater kid energy to it. Here's a video from her Instagram where she acts out a scene between a husband and wife. Lauren plays both roles.
All right, bye. I'm leaving. I'll see you tonight.
Oh, have a good day, love. I'll see you later.
Oh, don't forget I'm going to Philly tomorrow for that conference, okay?
What?
The conference in Philly.
No, I didn't know that.
I don't know. That's strange. I told you weeks ago.
I definitely didn't know that. Wait, the kids and I can come with you because they have a half day from school tomorrow, and I actually don't have any meetings on my calendar tomorrow. That would be fun.
No.
So she uses the conventions of comedic TikTok videos to show us something that's often private and can be so embarrassing. How communication breaks down when one member of a relationship is lying to the other. And Lauren knows the stakes here from her own life. She was a wife and mother of a young child when she discovered an affair, and the life she knew blew up. This week, Lauren and I talk about why affairs happen, even in non-monogamous relationships, and how to move through the fallout when affairs are discovered.
I definitely get more unfaithful spouses who reach out to me saying, I never in a million years thought I would have an affair. And here I am.
This is Death, Sex, and Money. The show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Anna Sale.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
When we gossip about affairs, the story usually has a bad guy, the one who lied, and a good guy, the one who was betrayed. In Lauren LaRusso's therapy practice, she sees up close how it's all a little more nuanced than that.
I work with anyone who's affected by or involved in an extramarital affair. So I work with betrayed spouses, spouses who are in an affair or have had an affair, and affair partners and couples in either a configuration, the marriage or the affair couple. And the focus of the work is to really use infidelity as the catalyst towards self-discovery and towards moving into a life of alignment for everyone involved.
Sort of like never let a crisis go to waste kind of thing.
Sure, exactly.
That's the work after. And she also recognizes what happens in the build-up to infidelity. The incremental collection of kindling that, with a moment of chemistry, can ignite.
I think that at our core, we want to feel alive, and we want to be seen and appreciated anew. And everything becomes old. So there's a vitality underneath it. These are people who find themselves lit up. We want to be seen. It validates our existence in life.
Lauren didn't always focus exclusively on infidelity in her work as a therapist, even after her marriage ended when her ex had an affair. But then she started being more open about it?
I just decided to begin to take to Instagram and talk out loud about infidelity. It's something that is not widely spoken about, but it is widely experienced. And I just figured I'd come at it from the lens of facts. And the result was astounding. The following exploded, and the demand to speak with me was so overwhelming that I ended up having to make a decision to transition out of my traditional private practice and exclusively provide services to the people reaching out to me on Instagram.
Okay, wow. When you started getting people reaching out to you, did you find that you had a preference for what role in infidelity you wanted to focus on with your clients? Do you know what I mean? Like what role they played?
That evolved for me very quickly, and it was clear I really loved working with unfaithful spouses.
Oh.
And yeah. You didn't
Tell me
expect
more
that
about
one,
that.
did you? Yeah. As a therapist, it felt extremely productive and effective to go to the source. Instead of treating the symptoms of the infidelity, which is what you're doing with a betrayed spouse, which I love it all, so don't get me wrong. But when you're working with a betrayed spouse, you're working to unpack something that's already happened outside of their control, awareness sometimes, or experience. When you're working with someone who's in the affair itself, you're working with the actual problem in real time, and you can enact and implement some interventions that would help that go better than it would have if they had just handled it in such a way that would cause, catastrophic crisis. And so I really enjoy that.
And the people who are involved in an affair, what's the term you use for them?
I use the term unfaithful spouse.
Unfaithful spouse. An unfaithful spouse, are most of those clients that you see, is it still secret what's happening?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what's that feel like?
It feels like they're trusting you with something that they don't trust anybody else with. And the amount of vulnerability and honesty that unfaithful spouses come to me with is astounding. So these are usually folks in situations where they are living a complete compartmentalized self in an extramarital relationship. And usually the only person who knows about this is the person who's in that relationship with them. So what I get is they come on screen with me for the first session, and a lot of them just immediately burst into tears. They've been living with inner conflict, turmoil, shame, fear, stress, uncertainty, confusion, and there's nobody that they can talk to about it who doesn't have skin in the game or who wouldn't shame them or make it into something that changes their lives in ways they're not ready for example. And so they're coming to me in this safe space where I'm completely neutral and I can help them actually get back to themselves from the source of what they're going through and move forward, essentially.
Uh-huh. You're making me realize that for somebody who is in the middle of an affair, even if they're talking to their best friend who they have complete trust in, that best friend has some kind of investment because they don't want their social group exploded. Or if you're talking to a sibling, like they have some kind of investment because it's about the extended family unit. Like it must be very hard to find someone with whom you can just talk about all the complexity of what's happening without feeling like you're being lobbied one way or the other.
There's shame and there's stigma. And anytime you're going to be honest about something you do in your life that, naturally, culturally, societally, morally, we assign shame and stigma to, you're not exactly going to be chomping at the bit to share that even with your closest people because, that's so vulnerable. You're admitting that you're someone who has transgressed certain values that you even have, most likely.
Uh-huh. And I want to just understand a little bit more about the people you're interacting with as clients. Is it primarily people who are involved in straight relationships?
Yes.
The people that you see who come to you, what are the gender patterns of who is the betrayed spouse and who is the initiator of infidelity?
It is all over the map. Men get the stigma of being the cheaters. I don't like that word, but I'll use it in this context.
Why not?
It's a label that is reductive, I think. I'd prefer to kind of look at it more in parts.
Mm-hmm.
This is a part of you that did something that's against your values. It's not all of who you are. So that's just me. That's just me.
It helps you explore why. Otherwise, they're going to clamp down and
Right. How negative is the phrase cheater? And you could argue, well, it's a very negative behavior you're engaging with. Absolutely. But they know that too. So I'd rather come at it with compassion that helps us lower our defenses and our blocks so we can get to actually the work instead of sort of throwing the same problem back at it, which is the way society refers to these things that happen in our lives. That being said, back to your original question, it's both. It's both are having affairs in large numbers. So I work with men and women who have stepped outside of their marriages.
Stepped outside. Something that sounds so nonchalant, like an afternoon walk around the block. Lauren knows that can be quite an understatement. When she was married with a young child, she found out her ex had been secretly dating another woman. He was a doctor and had to work irregular hours that were often long. Lauren discovered he wasn't always working.
I'm someone who was going through my life one way, thinking it was one way, thinking I was going to be married forever, thinking I was building and growing a life and a family. And then one day I found out that it was something different. And that life was not going to be the life that I had. And it blew everything apart. So yeah, I'm a betrayed spouse. I've never had an affair myself, but as a therapist, I have a lot of compassion for people in all configurations of life. That's just naturally how I approach things. It's how I approached my now ex-husband when I found out about it as well, with a lot of compassion and curiosity, along with anger and rage. But, I think just naturally, I want to understand what makes people do what they do and how that can be resolved.
And I want to ask you a few more questions about that, if that's okay. Like, in those first days and weeks and months when after you learned this information, how did you respond?
The thing with affairs is that when a betrayed spouse finds out about the affair, they're just discovering something that their spouse has known about since it began. So I was trying to play catch up to something that had been going on so much longer than my own awareness had begun around it. So you just have endless questions. Your mind is racked with trying to make sense of your own fragmented history, piecing together what was real and what was not real. And you're constantly cross-comparing what you now understand to be possible against what you had believed about your life previously. It's exhausting. Many people don't sleep. I did not sleep. I did not eat. So I was highly traumatized. And at the same time, this is your life. This is your life as you recognize it. And so for me, I was thrown into grief immediately, and part of grief is bargaining. It's like, how can I save this ship, right? The ship is going down. How do I keep it from going down? But it was very much too late.
Mm-hmm. In that piecing together time, I think one of the things that maybe makes discovering infidelity, different from before is we can look back at electronic communications. Like, we all have these archives that are searchable. Mm-hmm. Was that part of when you were trying to understand what did I know at the time and what was actually going on at the time? Did you spend a lot of time looking back at text messages, emails, calendars?
Digging for the truth. Yes. It's consuming. Yeah.
Do you think in hindsight that was an important part of making sense of what had happened? Or do you advise clients to move on from the text search bar?
I think it depends on what the outcome of their marriage is going to be. So this is the thing about dealing with affairs and healing from affairs. Every situation's really different because a lot of it depends on the betrayed spouse, what their orientation is to the affair. Are they willing to make it work or are they just done? So if you're on a fact-finding mission, is that to give yourself more ammunition or, why? So you just want to understand the purpose of that as a betrayed spouse. For an unfaithful spouse who stepped out of the marriage, if you're trying to make your marriage work, you do have to think carefully about how much to disclose. Trickle disclosure, which is usually what happens, that refers to when the unfaithful spouse says, you know everything there is to know. There's nothing more. I've told you everything. I've been honest. And then more truths trickle out and more truths trickle out. And that's extremely damaging, and it starts the recovery clock very much all over again because trust is not only destroyed again, but you've just demonstrated that you're willing to look me right in the eye, say you have all of the truth, and that not be true. So when it comes time for disclosure, it also depends on the goal of the unfaithful spouse. Are they trying to save this marriage, or are they just trying to be honest and willing to let the chips fall where they may? But usually the truth is a lot worse than we know at the end of the day as betrayed spouses, probably worse than we'll ever know. But the imagined truth can also be worse than the real truth. So you have to be cautious about that too.
More with infidelity therapist Lauren LaRusso after the break. After our episode last week about body size and Ozempic and your love lives, we heard from many listeners. And the thing that was interesting to me is there were lots of different moments that snagged you. One listener who asks that we not name her wrote in to say, as someone who has struggled with an eating disorder, quote, I was fairly annoyed by some of the things that were said by the panel on this episode, or rather not said, especially about food noise.
I thankfully no longer have food noise because I eat what I want in whatever quantity I want. I no longer worry or obsess or plan everything to a T because my body feels safe, trusting that I will feed it what it wants. I binged for years with intermittent calorie or food restriction, only eating the good foods. But once I let go of trying to lose weight or eat the quote-unquote right way, I found that I actually no longer had the need to binge, and the food noise quieted a lot. And for me, I think that food noise and binging actually were really good things and were my body trying to protect me and make sure I was eating enough and taking care of myself. So as I look back, I'm actually really grateful.
Another listener wrote in to say, there was one thing that was said that struck me in particular. As someone who's always been self-conscious about being on the thin side, I often cringe when someone makes a comment about it. After a hug saying, oh, you're so skinny, or you should eat more dessert. I usually just shrug it off, but once in a while I'll point out that nobody would hug me and then say, wow, you're really fat, or haven't you eaten enough? Maybe you should skip dessert. Thanks to your guest therapist who pointed out this societal and cultural quirk. And another listener responded to our guest Ronald Young Jr.'s comment that GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic aren't something he's interested in, and he compared it to his lack of interest in bariatric surgery. That listener wrote in to say that, quote, was pretty alarming to me. Of course, this type of surgery isn't for everyone for a variety of reasons, but he seemed to proliferate many of the stereotypes and stigmas that exist in the culture. Continuing, I had gastric sleeve back in November 2020 and have lost about 160 pounds. I have found it to be a largely positive experience, although you can never fully prepare for the emotional impact of a body transformation like that. Thank you for reaching out. We like hearing from you when you want to hear more about something, and also particularly when you think we've missed something. You can email us anytime at deathsexmoney@slate.com. And this week, as Lauren and I are talking about betrayal and lying that can end a marriage, we made a special drop for Slate Plus members where I talked to a listener from the Philippines who was in her 20s and in a marriage where she didn't feel like she could stay and then couldn't divorce.
You know, it's kind of like that divorce is not allowed in your country, but you never really think about how that's going to impact you, Like, okay, there's no divorce. Yeah, there's got to be another way. You can't force me to stay in a marriage.
That's Anna, who decades later is out of that marriage and living in a different country, Germany. You can hear more of our conversation by becoming a member of Slate Plus. It's our way of thanking you for joining in to support our work, and we're making at least 2 extra drops a month for Slate Plus members. You can join Slate Plus right through Apple Podcasts or Spotify on the Death, Sex, and Money show page, or go to slate.com/DSM Plus. This episode is brought to you by Saks.com. There's joy in finding the perfect gift for the ones you love, but it can be a challenge. Saks.com's holiday gift guide makes it easy. Whether you're surprising your hard-to-shop-for sister with a Chloe bracelet bag or gifting your partner a memorable scent from Gucci, at Saks.com, there's holiday inspiration for every personality on your list. I can remember as a kid, my mom took a trip to New York right around this time of year and went to Saks. And she came home with a few items that I remember feeling they were so sophisticated and luxurious and special. And that's kind of what I think about when I go to Saks.com and look around. When you go to the holiday gift guide, I went to the stocking stuffers section and immediately saw these really cool perfume sets that could be a nice gift for someone, some new Ray-Ban sunglasses. I also noticed some La Mer face cream that maybe I would enjoy. You can add instant cheer to your home with some bright decor or bundle up in a scarf coat from Totem to stay warm all season long. Saks.com's hand-picked guide can help take the stress out of the holidays by helping you choose gifts for your loved ones and maybe 1 or 2 for yourself. Find gifts guaranteed to bring joy to everyone this holiday season at Saks.com. That's Saks.com for the ultimate holiday gift guide and all the shopping inspiration you need. After a night with drinks, it's tough to bounce back the next day. But with Pre-Alcohol Probiotic by ZBiotics, there's a surefire way to wake up feeling fresh after a night of drinking. Their probiotic was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. This is a proactive solution that wards off feeling miserable the next day instead of a reactive approach like drinking electrolytes or eating greasy foods. Also, ZBiotics is continuing to invent probiotics that will help with everyday challenges of modern living. You can go to zbiotics.com/DSM to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use DSM at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/DSM and use the code DSM at checkout for 15% off. This episode is brought to you by Saks.com. There's joy in finding the perfect gift for the ones you love, but it can be a challenge. Saks.com's holiday gift guide makes it easy. Whether you're surprising your hard-to-shop-for sister with a Chloe bracelet bag or gifting your partner a memorable scent from Gucci, At Saks.com, there's holiday inspiration for every personality on your list. I can remember as a kid, my mom took a trip to New York right around this time of year and went to Saks. And she came home with a few items that I remember feeling they were so sophisticated and luxurious and special. And that's kind of what I think about when I go to Saks.com and look around. When you go to the holiday gift guide, I went to the stocking stuffers section and immediately saw these really cool perfume sets that could be a nice gift for someone, some new Ray-Ban sunglasses. I also noticed some La Mer face cream that maybe I would enjoy. You can add instant cheer to your home with some bright decor or bundle up in a scarf coat from Totem to stay warm all season long. Saks.com's hand-picked guide can help take the stress out of the holidays by helping you choose gifts for your loved ones and maybe one or two for yourself. Find gifts guaranteed to bring joy to everyone this holiday season at Saks.com. That's Saks.com for the ultimate holiday gift guide and all the shopping inspiration you need. This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. When Lauren LaRusso found out her husband was having an affair, she wanted to try to work things out. But over time, she realized her husband wasn't quite as committed to saving the marriage. Looking back, when you think about you use the word recovery clock, which I'm interested in. When you think back for you, how long did it take for you to realize that this marriage wasn't going to continue?
I knew it in my bones, but I couldn't admit it and I couldn't acknowledge it. And I knew the marriage was over one night when I realized that the affair had never actually ended.
Oh.
And everything fell apart. There was a facade that we were working on the marriage the whole time, but the affair had never ended. And it all came crashing down. And I was served with divorce papers a couple of days later. I could not bring myself to file for divorce. I felt like it wasn't my step to take, as weird as that is. I was sort of like, I'm not responsible for this. If you're going to take ownership, like, you're going to have to divorce me. I couldn't do it. It just wasn't in my self-concept. I could not identify with the idea of divorce. And so, I think a lot of times an unfaithful spouse is hoping their betrayed spouse will file for divorce. I see this a lot in my practice. They are waiting for the betrayed spouse to kick them out, to call it quits, to serve the divorce papers, and the betrayed spouse won't. And they end up having to do it. And that was exactly what happened to me as well.
And when you think back on that version of yourself, where do you think that came from, that idea of, I'm not going to be the one to file for divorce? That's not me. I don't file for divorce.
Oh gosh, control. Doesn't everything come back to control? I grew up with parents who were still married. My ex-husband's parents were still married. I didn't grow up around divorce. And my ideals and my values and my projections for my own future were forever, right? I would just sit there like counting the years we were going to be married. And that felt like success to me.
Mm-hmm. At the time you had a child, right?
Yes. She was 2.5. Yeah.
And so when you think back on the choices you made during that time, is it possible to disentangle how you thought about your family as a mother and how you thought about your family as a wife and what that meant about what you were willing to do or not do?
For me, they were definitely entangled. If I had not had my daughter, I do not believe I would have stayed and worked through the post-affair discovery in the manner I did. And I'm actually glad I did, because I learned a lot during that time about myself and the work I had to do as a person. But I wasn't leaving for my daughter. As backwards as that might be, I couldn't fathom the idea of being a single mother. I didn't understand what that would look like or feel like. I didn't feel equipped for that. It just wasn't part of my plan. And, we grow up with this vision of what our future is going to look like. And then when it doesn't match, the resistance is usually our initial response. So that
This
was
is
true
not
for
happening,
me.
right?
This is not happening. Like, how dare you change my life story? Like, no, not me, not us, no. We're going to fix this thing.
Yeah. You described that you, in retrospect, thinking about those months that you spent working together or thinking that you were working together, that you learned a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
What were some things that you learned that you hadn't ever realized?
So much. It feels like my first version was asleep behind the wheel. And it feels like the affair was this huge wake-up call that just blew everything apart. And to put it back together again required me to do some deep digging into my role in the construct, not in the affair. But I wanted to understand how to heal and how to grow in the aftermath of it. And as a therapist, I look for insight and I look for information about what's causing me my own pain. So I learned a lot about my desire to control people and things in unhealthy ways. Now, I was not an outwardly controlling person, but I thought that I had such a wonderful influence over how my life was going by giving in these kind of self-abandoning ways. And I didn't realize that that was very maladaptive. And it led to a very imbalanced relationship where I was teaching my spouse that I didn't actually value myself. I only valued him. So there was so much to unpack underneath those layers of over caretaking, over giving, codependency. So those were things I never would have understood. And actually, by the time my spouse filed for divorce, I was beginning to hit a crisis of realizing I don't think I would have chosen this person if I knew then what I know now about myself.
When you say like codependency and sort of giving in maladaptive ways, you looked back on what being a wife had looked like for you, and you saw someone who was trying to be such an excellent wife and such an excellent manager of a household that that level of perfection would keep you safe and loved.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And in that version of that relationship, when your now ex-husband was disappointed in something you'd done or grumpy and you couldn't talk him out of it or tell him, like, when there was something that was off, was your response to talk him out of it because you were you were trying the best you could, and if he was unhappy, then that was a threat?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you know so much, Anna?
Well, I have some of these characteristics myself.
I'm like, hang on. Were you there? A second. Yes, that's exactly right. I did not tolerate his unhappiness. I just didn't tolerate it. I just wouldn't let it happen.
It was so uncomfortable. If you're unhappy and I can't talk you out of it, like, that's really scary.
And he's like, just let me have my feelings. Like, damn. I could see some of where he was coming from. Sometimes he and I were able to have some conversations that were illuminating. None of it justifies the affair, but, we just, we kind of had our own special sauce, and it probably set us up to diverge in this particular way. And neither of us was probably being as honest with each other as we could have been for many different reasons.
So you say it was things that he said that made you reflect on ways that you were thinking of yourself as a victim. It was...
Yeah, and I don't think all of them were very fair because, again, when it comes to infidelity, the person who stepped out of the marriage is usually building a very good case for themselves in order to help justify why they're doing something that transgresses their values. And so when it came time to have those conversations, this was the first time I had been hearing any of this stuff. So I'm thinking, well, You've never said any of this to me before, and I've always asked you, please tell me if there's something in our relationship that bothers you or that I could be doing better. Because again, I wanted to be the perfect spouse. So I didn't hear any of that. And now you're telling me after this thing, so you must just be justifying it. So it did take a while to unpack some of those things for myself. But in hindsight, when you're together from a young age, you're kind of like growing into yourselves together. And if you don't share that with each other in real time, authentically, as best as you can, there might have been a lot of feelings and observations and thoughts that were not shared. Mm-hmm. So it can be hard because you're like, well, what's just justifying your affair? And then what is true?
Mm-hmm. And it's probably some mix, some
It's
stew.
some mix. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've never thought quite of that idea that whoever is stepping out has to create justification. And when it's discovered, there's all this new information about the way that the betrayed spouse is caricatured into this person who kind of, if not doesn't deserve this, at least wasn't a good enough partner that forced them to take this step.
Yes. Yeah. And every situation's different. So there are some unfaithful spouses I work with who are like, my spouse is lovely. I'm having an affair. Mm-hmm. So again, like this was my situation where for whatever reason, there were a lot of fingers being pointed at me that made me feel, well, I guess I'm just that unlovable. And that was a wound I had to heal for a long time. And it's a double whammy because as a betrayed spouse, you're adjusting to the fact that you've been lied to and betrayed. And then you're also getting all of this feedback that you're the problem and that if only you had done something different or been better, they wouldn't have felt the way they did that compelled them to step out. So it's a real psychic annihilation. And no wonder it's hard to heal from.
That's sounds like a therapy term that's also very vivid. And I know exactly what you're saying.
You're like, well, there might just not be any coming back from this as a human. So I guess I'm just unfit for human consumption and I will go into my hidey hole and probably never come out.
Coming up, Lauren not only comes out of her hidey hole, she turns her focus at work on why unfaithful spouses do what they do and sharing with others what things can look like at the beginning of that slippery slope.
I get a lot of feedback on my Instagram account, DMs that say, you prevented me from having an affair. Because I share the down the road experience, people who are at that early juncture, that inflection point, say, whoa, that's what's happening here. And they pivot. And they're like, thank you so much. I was about to freaking implode my life.
Each year, Americans throw away 25% more trash from Thanksgiving to New Year's. What if there was a way to get through the holidays without creating more waste? Meet Blueland. Here's what I have noticed with Blueland. I feel good using their products. When I do laundry and I open the reusable metal tin filled with detergent, I know my clothes are going to get cleaned and I'm not going to end up with a big plastic container that I'll aspirationally recycle that'll just end up in a landfill. Same with dishwasher detergent and dish soap. There's also multi-purpose cleaner and glass cleaner. It's easy to use with these tablets that you mix with water and these good-looking reusable spray bottles. Even my kids get into it, and then they end up helping clean too. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials. The idea is simple. Grab one of the beautiful Forever bottles, fill it with warm water, drop in the tablet, and get cleaning. Refills start at just $2.25, and you don't have to buy a new plastic bottle every time you run out. For a limited time, Blueland's hand soap is getting a little festive upgrade with a beautiful chocolate box-inspired gift set and cozy scents like toasted vanilla, wintry pine, and sweet chestnut. It's the perfect gift for your loved one or yourself to reduce waste. Blueland has a special offer for listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/DSM. You don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/DSM for 15% off. That's blueland.com/DSM to get 15% off. This episode is brought to you by Public.com. Did you know you can lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at Public.com? The Federal Reserve announced another rate cut, and there could be more rate cuts this year and in 2025 as well. That's good news if you're looking to buy a home, but it might not be so good for the interest you earn on your cash. So if you want to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high-yield and investment-grade bonds, check out Public.com. It only takes a couple of minutes to sign up, and once you lock in your yield, you can earn regular interest payments even as rates decline. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at public.com/DSM. But remember, your yield is not locked in until you invest. Brought to you by Public Investing, member FINRA and SIPC. As of September 26, 2024, the average annualized yield to worst across the bond account is greater than 6%. Yield to worst is not guaranteed, not an investment recommendation. All investing involves risks. Visit public.com/disclosures/bond-account for more info. So having gone through this in your own life, when you are sitting with a client, let's say it's a husband with a young child who is actively stepping out on the marriage and the wife doesn't know, what's that like for you when you are trying to help them explore what's going on with their decisions?
In terms of, are you wondering, do I feel protective of their wife and child?
I'm wondering if there's two things happening where you're at once thinking of what happened in your life and also you're their therapist.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't think about what happened in my own life, partially because that's our training as a therapist, is to separate ourselves from our client's experience. And I just do that extremely automatically. That being said, we are humans. Therapists are people, and we come with our own lens. I'm trying to help that person who's having an affair move forward with as much integrity and intention as they can. And that's what happens with unfaithful spouses. They lose integrity, meaning they lose their sense of wholeness because they're fragmented, because they're playing multiple roles and different sides and they're in split relationships. And they stop seeing it because they adjust to it and it's a mess.
How much do you think phones and technology have made your work more complicated? The ways our heads can be in one space and our bodies can be somewhere totally different.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we're already a mess with that if you're not having an affair. So then you add an affair into it and forget it. There's a lot of apps that affairs transgress on. So just our access to each other is completely different than it used to be. You used to have an affair with the secretary at work or maybe, the neighbor's spouse or something more in proximity. Now people are connecting across the world and they're flying to see each other. They're meeting on vacation. It's completely without boundaries, and we can take that home with us and we can keep it going. So it's completely on another level. It doesn't make my work harder. It just makes affairs probably a lot easier to have than ever before. It also makes discovery a treasure trove.
A treasure trove is such
Yeah, yucky. Put that treasure away, bury it.
Speaking of discovery, legal discovery is a whole other part of this. I remember when I was divorcing and having an early consultation with a family lawyer about separating assets, the lawyer asked me point blank if I'd been cheated on because that would play into our strategy. When Lauren and her husband were divorcing and divvying up their assets, it was legally strategic for both of them to stay in the family home. So they did. Even as the pandemic hit, they lived under one roof.
We were cohabitating through our entire divorce. Very adversarial. my nervous system was completely shot. I was very ill. And, here we go. Let's hunker down with someone that is a stranger now to me, who I'm actively divorcing, and there's no contact with the outside world. It's really a recipe for success.
Why did you share space? Was it for financial and public health reasons?
Again, I think stubbornness and control. I felt like, please leave, right? You've done this thing and you've elected to leave our home so many times when it benefited you. You weren't home. So now you won't leave. And, you've got lawyers chiming in there who will say things like, don't leave, you'll abdicate rights to the family home. And it confuses everything. So I deeply wanted to leave. It was not healthy for anybody.
Eventually, Lauren's divorce was final, and they both found new places to live. And with that distance, Lauren was able to think about what went wrong in her marriage. In her practice now, she knows there are certainly instances when the new relationship is the better relationship, even when it started illicitly. In those cases, she tries to help clients minimize the damage that affairs can cause. Have you had people you've met where you're like, wow, this is like a classic love story where you have found a new level of connection and soulmate, in a Shakespearean sort of way, where you're like,
Yep.
What is one to do?
I have. And, again, it's about walking forward with integrity. So if you've met somebody that you are more yourself with than anybody, you didn't know this kind of connection and authenticity existed, all those wonderful things, that's great, but you're married. So now we're going to have to handle our business. The reality is that's wonderful for you, but first it comes with a lot of pain for a lot of other people. So there's a pragmatism that needs to be handled so that you can actually walk forward into a life together with as much integrity as you possibly can.
Have you found that, say that's the terms of a conversation in a first intake session, and you're like, we're going to have to work on what it's going to take to extract you? Is there some drop-off for the second and third sessions in those cases?
Oh, there's a lot of foot dragging.
Uh-huh.
Because the affair creates conditions where naturally you're getting your needs met in both places. So intellectually, you can't keep doing both if you want to be with the person that you have found that you would now like to forge a life with. But you don't want to part with everything you know. And you still are bonded to your family, to extended family. I mean, our roots go deep with the people in our lives. You've built an entire community and you've built a small culture together with your spouse. And actually ending that requires a tremendous amount of grief and loss to be experienced. And that's surprising to the people who end up, needing to take that step. They imagine themselves like just floating out of their marriage into like this beautiful love boat. But then they're like, I actually have to like nuke my family.
Can you give me like an example of a scenario where someone leaves a marriage to pursue a relationship with someone they've had an affair with, and they have pursued it with integrity, that transition? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. It looks like taking ownership of yourself. So if you had the affair and it was discovered, that unfaithful spouse is taking ownership of themselves and taking responsibility. If it's not discovered, they still have to take responsibility of not wanting to be married anymore. Some people do it gracefully, but in the case that I'm thinking about, the betrayed spouse was confused, angry, but ultimately, did accept this. And the spouse who had the affair did move forward to create, a really beautiful life with his affair partner. Their children melded together. Vacations, family dinners, everyone had a lot of questions and it was not smooth sailing, right? So what I was coaching him through was how to have conversations with his adult children with integrity. how much to share in age-appropriate ways, and how to, at the end of the day, just continue to take responsibility for himself. And, the rest tends to sort itself out. And the result was actually an improved relationship with his children because they finally got to know their dad for who he actually really was instead of kind of just dad. You see your parent as a whole person who has desires and wants of their own. And kind of after everyone moves through the grief, sometimes they're just, in this case, they were just happy to see their father happy.
And our whole conversation thus far has been about people where there's been an agreement of monogamy, and so there's betrayal when there's relationships outside of the marriage or the relationship. When you are in conversation, maybe say with a couple, and there's been a betrayal, and it comes up, maybe we just need to open up our marriage. How do you talk about that?
I'll be honest, most people want a monogamous relationship. And so it's my work to kind of wean out, are you offering that or going towards that as a last-ditch effort to save the marriage, where you're negotiating away something that you actually want? Does that make sense? Like really trying to get to the authenticity of that move. It needs to be something that is authentically chosen into, I think, by both people in the relationship, not a Hail Mary pass. And I would say most of the people I work with, they do want a deeply loving, open, committed, fun, playful, exploratory, monogamous relationship. And if they want to open it up, it's not a fail-proof against straying, because people are unfaithful in open relationships as well by keeping secrets and transgressing the agreed upon boundaries. So again, what are we aiming for becomes the question.
Is there anything, do you have sort of, go-to advice when, say, I think no matter if some of us have stepped out on relationships, some of us have been stepped out on, some of us have experienced both, some of us have experienced neither. But I think anyone listening who has been in a relationship has also had that experience where they feel that tangle of connection with someone who they're not in a monogamous relationship with. How do you talk someone through noticing that, and then what to do with it if they don't want to explode their life?
If I were to talk to someone who's at that initial stage, it would be catch what's happening in your imagination. Because the imagination is where things turn from platonic to sparky infidelity. Affairs start in the mind before they begin in real life. Are you getting turned on by that person? Are you imagining yourself with that person? Are you feeling all those tingles? It is all emotional. And the minute you catch that emotional response, you know you're heading down a road. And a lot of times people do notice themselves heading down that road and they're like, wee, let's go. Like, I haven't felt this way in a long time. I am on the train. But if you are wanting to be cautious, take that early boundary as the sign to do a real gut check on where you're headed. And perhaps check in with, where am I feeling vulnerable in my life? Where do I need to
Why does this feel good? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I go play pickleball and get the same feeling? Maybe.
Or do an interview for a podcast and feel like I'm deeply emotionally connecting with someone else?
Yeah. There you go.
Do you know that Erykah Badu song, Next Lifetime?
No, I feel like I should though.
Oh, you got to pull it up.
Okay.
It's a classic from the late 90s, and it's all about It goes, what am I supposed to do when I want you in my world? How can I want you for myself when I'm already someone's girl? I guess I'll see you next lifetime. We'll be butterflies. I guess I'll see you next lifetime. It's so good because it's like, I'm not going to deny that there's something happening here. And also, we have to wait till we're reincarnated.
I am praying for reincarnation so I can put my hands on you. Yes. I mean, there better be multiple lives.
That's Lauren LaRusso. You can find her on Instagram at Lauren LaRusso or at laurenlarusso.com. And you can find a link to that perfect song by Erykah Badu in our show notes. This episode was produced by Cameron Drews. Death, Sex, and Money is produced by Slate. Please support the production of our show by becoming a member of Slate Plus. You'll not only be supporting our work on Death, Sex, and Money, you'll get access to benefits, including listening to our show and all of the great podcasts that Slate makes, like Slow Burn and Decoder Ring, without any ads or sponsor breaks. You'll also get special Slate Plus drops that are just for our members. You can subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just go to slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen. You'll be supporting the people who make Death, Sex, and Money with me at Slate: Andrew Dunn, Zoe Ajoulay, and Cameron Drews. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer at Slate. Alicia Montgomery is Slate's head of audio. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLure and Steve Lewis. And if you're new to our show, welcome. We're glad you're here. Find us and follow us on Instagram at DeathSexMoney. And I write a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe at annasale.substack.com, or there's a link in our show notes. And you can reach us anytime with voice memos, pep talks, questions, or critiques at our email address, deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. There's one more thing I want to tell you. It's just something that's stuck in my head for the last few weeks. I was married before, and I didn't have kids. And then I got divorced, and I met my husband, and I have 2 kids now who are 8 and 5. And sometimes my ex-husband comes up into conversation, and somehow they were asking questions about what he was like. And then I described how when I met their dad. I could tell he was going to be a really good father, and I wanted to have kids with him. And my 5-year-old was like, what if you had met Daddy when you were still married? And I was like,
who are you?
Like, then it would have been more dramatic.
Wow, kids are amazing.
It's like, I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate.